The courthouse was busy that morning. People hurried in and out, their footsteps echoing on the shiny floor. Some sat quietly on the wooden benches, waiting for their turn. The air was thick with tension, but no one really knew what was about to happen. Maria stood near the entrance, calm but firm. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her eyes looked steady. She wasn't afraid, but she knew today would change everything. Maria had lived in this small town all her life. She worked hard every day, caring for her family and helping her neighbors whenever she could. But Maria was not just any woman, she was a voice for many who often felt ignored. She spoke up when others stayed silent. She believed in fairness and justice, even when the world seemed unfair to her. Earlier that morning, police officers had come to Maria's house. They said she was under arrest. Many in the town had heard the news and were surprised. Maria had never been in trouble before. So why was she being taken to court now? What was this all about? The officer who put the handcuffs on Maria was serious but polite. His name was Officer Lewis. He didn't say much, only that Maria needed to come with him. As the cold metal closed around her wrists, Maria did not struggle. She knew fighting wouldn't help. Instead, she held her head high, ready to face whatever was coming. The walk to the courthouse was short but felt heavy. People stopped and stared. Some whispered to each other, their voices low but full of questions. Maria could hear their doubts, but she did not let them shake her. She had a purpose. She had a reason to stand tall. Inside the courthouse, the room was crowded. The seats were full of people who had come to watch the case. Cameras were set up in the corners, and reporters took notes quickly. Maria noticed all this but stayed focused. This was more than just a trial, it was a moment to show the truth. When Maria entered the courtroom, she saw Judge Wilson sitting at the front. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a serious face. He looked at Maria briefly, then returned to his papers. Maria's heart did not race, instead, it beat with steady calm. She was ready to speak for herself and for those who could not. The prosecutor began to speak, explaining the charges against Maria. They said she had broken the law, that she had caused trouble. But Maria and her supporters knew the real story was different. They knew this was not about crime, it was about silence. Maria had been raising her voice about important problems in the community, and some people did not want to hear her. As the prosecutor spoke, Maria looked around the courtroom. She saw friends and strangers watching her. Some faces showed doubt, others showed support. She knew that what she said next could change how they saw her and maybe even how the law worked. Suddenly, Maria asked the judge if she could say something. The room quieted. Everyone looked at her, surprised. Judge Wilson nodded slowly, giving her permission. Maria stood and faced the crowd. She spoke in a clear, calm voice. She talked about her life, her family, and the struggles she had faced. She talked about the people in her neighborhood who had no one to help them. She spoke about fairness, and how she believed everyone deserved a chance to be heard. Her words were simple but strong. The courtroom listened carefully. Even Judge Wilson seemed to pay closer attention. Maria was not just defending herself, she was sharing a story many did not know. A story of hope, courage, and the need for change. After she finished speaking, the room stayed silent for a moment. Then, a few people began to clap softly. Maria returned to her seat, feeling a small smile grow inside her. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but she was not alone. Officer Lewis looked at Maria with something new in his eyes. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was understanding. The handcuffs were still there, but Maria felt freer than ever. As the judge prepared to continue, Maria took a deep breath. She was ready for whatever came next. This was more than a court case, it was a chance to make a difference. And Maria was ready to take that chance. The courtroom was still buzzing from Maria's words. Some people whispered softly, others looked thoughtful. But no one really knew the full story behind her arrest. Maria had kept much of her life private, protecting those she cared about. Now, it was time for the truth to be seen and heard. Maria's story began long before the courtroom drama. She had lived in the same neighborhood for over 20 years, watching it change slowly, sometimes for the worse. Many families struggled to find good jobs or safe places for their children to play. The streets were often quiet, but beneath that quiet was a pain that no one spoke about. Maria was not the kind of person who gave up easily. When she saw people in her community struggling, she did what she could to help. She volunteered at the local school, organized neighborhood cleanups, and spoke to town officials about the problems people faced. But her biggest fight was for justice, fair treatment for everyone, no matter where they came from or what color their skin was. Over the years, Maria had become a quiet leader. People trusted her because she listened and cared. But not everyone liked that. Some powerful people wanted things to stay the same. They didn't want to lose their control or their money. And they certainly didn't want Maria asking too many questions. One day, Maria had discovered something important, something that showed the town's leaders were ignoring problems that hurt the community. She had papers, reports, and stories from people who lived through the unfair treatment. But instead of listening, those leaders tried to shut her down. That was when the trouble began. The charges against Maria were confusing to many. They said she had broken rules and caused problems during protests. But Maria and her friends knew these accusations were false. They were a way to stop her from speaking out. It was a way to scare others who might try to do the same. As Maria sat in the courtroom, she thought about all the people she had met in her journey, the children who needed safe parks, the elders who needed better health care, the workers who needed fair wages. Her fight was not just for herself, it was for every person who believed in fairness and kindness. Outside the courtroom, Maria's community was watching closely. Some gathered in small groups, sharing stories and hoping for justice. Maria's friend, Anna, stood nearby, her eyes filled with worry but also pride. She had helped Maria gather the evidence and organize meetings. She knew this fight was bigger than both of them. Anna whispered to a neighbor, "Maria has always been brave. She's standing up not just for herself but for all of us." Back inside, the judge called the next witness. It was Mr. Thompson, a local shop owner who had supported Maria from the start. He spoke about how Maria had helped the neighborhood, organizing events and encouraging young people to stay in school. "Maria is a leader," Mr. Thompson said softly. "She never wanted trouble. She only wanted a better life for everyone." His words touched many in the courtroom, but the prosecutor seemed determined to keep the focus on the charges. Still, Maria's story was reaching people's hearts. As the hearing continued, Maria thought about the future. She imagined a world where people listened to each other, where fairness was not just a dream but a reality. She knew the path would be difficult, but she also knew she was not alone. The handcuffs on her wrists felt heavy, but her spirit was light. She was ready to keep fighting, no matter what came next. Because sometimes, the most important battles were the hardest ones to fight. When the court took a short break, Maria's lawyer approached her quietly. "People are starting to see your side," he said with a small smile. This is not just your fight anymore. It's everyone's fight. Maria nodded. She thought about all the faces in the courtroom, friends, strangers, people who had never spoken up before. Maybe today would be the start of something new. As the break ended, Maria stood tall again, ready to face the next part of her story. She wasn't just a woman in handcuffs, she was a symbol of hope, courage, and the power of truth. The courtroom was filled with silence. Maria's words from earlier still echoed in the minds of everyone present. Judge Wilson sat at the bench, his expression serious and unreadable. He was a man who had spent many years in the courtroom, making decisions that affected the lives of many people. Today, he faced a case unlike any he had seen before. Judge Wilson had heard many stories during his career, but Maria's was different. She spoke with a calm strength that could not be ignored. Her courage to speak out against injustice was clear. He noticed the way she looked around the room, not with anger or fear, but with hope. As the prosecutor prepared to continue, Judge Wilson paused for a moment. He looked at Maria closely. Her hands were still handcuffed, but her eyes were free and clear. Something inside him stirred a feeling he had not expected. The prosecutor's voice rose again, trying to remind the court of the charges. He spoke about rules that Maria had supposedly broken during protests. But the judge knew there was more to the story than just the words on the papers. He could see the tension in the room, the unspoken questions on the faces of those watching. Judge Wilson cleared his throat and called for order. "Let us remember," he said slowly, "that the purpose of this court is to seek truth and fairness. We must listen carefully before making judgments." Maria nodded slightly, appreciating the judge's words. She felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this court was different, maybe this time, the law could be a tool for justice, not silence. The judge then asked the prosecutor to present the evidence clearly and fairly. The prosecutor went on, explaining the events from his point of view. But as he spoke, Judge Wilson noticed something: there were gaps in the story. Important questions remained unanswered. He decided to take control of the hearing. "I will ask the witnesses to speak one by one," he said firmly. "We need to hear all sides before making a decision." The first witness was a young woman named Sarah, a neighbor who had seen Maria helping children in the community. Sarah spoke softly but with confidence. She told the court how Maria had organized after-school programs and had always encouraged kindness and respect. Judge Wilson listened carefully. He looked at Maria again, seeing her not as a defendant, but as a person who cared deeply for others. Next, the judge called on a community leader, Mr. Jenkins. He spoke about the challenges the neighborhood faced: lack of resources, safety concerns, and how Maria had been a voice for change. His words painted a picture of a community struggling but hopeful. As the day went on, Judge Wilson grew more thoughtful. The courtroom's energy had shifted. What had started as a simple case of rules broken was becoming something much larger: a question about fairness and understanding. The judge then turned to Maria. "You have spoken bravely," he said. "Would you like to explain more about why you took the actions that led to these charges?" Maria took a deep breath and began to speak again. She told her story in simple words, about the people she cared for and the changes she hoped to see. She explained that her actions were never meant to break the law but to protect the rights of those who felt powerless. Judge Wilson nodded slowly. He saw the truth in her eyes and the sincerity in her voice. For the first time, he felt a new respect for the woman standing before him. As the hearing continued, the judge asked questions not to trap Maria, but to understand. He asked about her goals, her hopes, and her fears. Maria answered honestly, her voice steady. The courtroom watched in silence, sensing something important was happening. Judge Wilson was not just a man in charge, he was someone beginning to see the world through a different lens. When the session ended for the day, the judge stood and addressed the court. "This case is not just about rules and charges," he said. "It is about justice, fairness, and truth. I will take time to consider everything carefully." Maria felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She knew the judge's words were sincere. For the first time, she felt that the law might be on her side, not against her. As people began to leave the courtroom, many whispered about the change they had seen. Maria's courage and the judge's openness had made an impact. Outside, Maria's friend Anna waited with a hopeful smile. "This is the beginning," she said softly. "Things are moving in the right direction." Maria looked at the sky and felt a quiet strength inside her. The fight was far from over, but the walls of silence were starting to crack. And with each crack, light entered the room. The courtroom was filled with a quiet energy as the trial continued. Maria's courage had caught the attention of many, but there was still much to be done. The judge had allowed her to speak before, but now she knew she had to stand even taller to make her voice heard louder and clearer. Maria looked around the room. The faces were a mix of curiosity, support, and doubt. Some people had already begun to see her in a new light, while others still clung to the old stories they had been told. But Maria wasn't there to win everyone's approval. She was there to tell the truth. When the judge called her to speak again, Maria rose slowly, her hands still cuffed but her spirit free. The room fell silent, waiting to hear what she had to say. Maria's voice was steady, filled with the strength of someone who had faced many challenges but refused to give up. "Your Honor," she began, "I understand that the court must consider the laws and rules that keep our society safe. But sometimes, those rules are used to keep people silent, to keep the voices of the community unheard." She paused, looking directly at the judge. "I am not here to break the law. I am here because I believe that justice means more than punishment. It means listening, understanding, and protecting the rights of everyone." Maria's words touched many hearts in the courtroom. She spoke about the people she had worked with, the children who needed safe places to play, the families who struggled to pay their bills, and the neighbors who hoped for a better future. She told the court that her actions were about love and care, not anger or trouble. The judge listened carefully. His expression softened as Maria shared her story. He knew the law was strict, but he also understood that sometimes, the law needed to grow with the people it served. Maria's lawyer watched proudly. She had seen her client's strength from the beginning, but now Maria was showing a new level of bravery, speaking not just for herself, but for her whole community. As Maria finished, the courtroom remained silent for a moment. Then, something unexpected happened. With a calm but confident step, Maria moved forward. Without hesitation, she walked up to the judge's bench. The room gasped softly, surprised by her boldness. She looked up at Judge Wilson and said, "Justice belongs to all of us, not only those who wear the robes. Today, I ask not just to be heard but to remind us all that fairness must be shared." Slowly, Maria took the judge's seat, the place where decisions were made. For a moment, the courtroom was stunned. The judge watched her carefully, but there was no anger in his eyes, only a deep respect. Maria sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. It was more than a seat, it was a symbol of hope, a call for change. She was no longer just a defendant, she was a voice for justice itself. Some people in the courtroom whispered nervously. Others nodded quietly, understanding what Maria was trying to say. She was showing them that true justice was about more than rules, it was about people. Judge Wilson stood slowly and approached the bench. He placed a hand gently on the armrest and looked at Maria with a soft smile. "You remind us all why we are here," he said quietly. "Justice is not only about laws, but about fairness, kindness, and respect. Thank you for that reminder." The courtroom felt lighter, as if a new energy had filled the room. People began to see Maria not as someone accused, but as someone brave enough to challenge the system in the best way possible through words and actions. Maria stood up from the bench and returned to her seat. The judge took his place again but looked at the proceedings with a new sense of openness. The rest of the hearing continued with a different feeling, one of hope and possibility. Witnesses spoke more honestly, the lawyers asked better questions, and the judge listened more carefully. Outside the courtroom, news of Maria's act spread quickly. People talked about the woman who took the judge's seat not to disrespect, but to inspire. Her courage gave others the strength to believe that change was possible. Maria's friend Anna waited for her after the hearing. "You did something no one will forget," Anna said softly. "You showed them what real justice means." Maria smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't known before. "It's not just me," she said. "It's all of us. Together, we can make things better." As they walked away from the courthouse, Maria looked up at the bright sky. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: her voice had been heard. And sometimes, that was the first step toward true justice. The courtroom was still buzzing from the moment Maria had taken the judge's seat. Everyone was talking quietly among themselves, trying to understand what had just happened. Some were amazed, some confused, but most felt something had shifted. A new energy was in the room. Maria returned to her seat, her heart steady but full of purpose. She knew what she had done was bold, but it was the only way to show the court that justice was more than just rules on paper. It was about people, about fairness, and about listening to those who were often ignored. Judge Wilson looked at her with respect. He had never seen such courage in his courtroom. Instead of anger, he felt inspired. He knew that the law was important, but so was the voice of the people. Maria had reminded him of that today. As the trial continued, the judge made an important decision. "I will allow Maria to speak freely," he said. "This court will listen not only to the law but also to the stories behind it." Maria took a deep breath and stood up again. She looked at everyone in the room: the lawyers, the witnesses, the people watching. Her voice was calm and clear. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said. "I want to tell you about my community, about the struggles and hopes of the people I care for. This is not just about me. It's about everyone who feels unheard." She began to share stories, simple, everyday stories that showed the strength and kindness of her neighbors. She spoke about a mother working 2 jobs to feed her children, about a young boy who dreamed of becoming a teacher, about an elder who wanted to see the streets safe for everyone. The courtroom listened, moved by Maria's honesty. Her words painted a picture of life that many had never seen before. It was not about crime or punishment, it was about people trying their best, even when the odds were against them. Judge Wilson nodded slowly. He could feel the weight of Maria's words. He began to ask questions not about laws or rules, but about the heart of the community. Maria answered openly, sharing her hopes for a better future. The prosecutor, watching closely, began to change his tone. He asked fewer harsh questions and more thoughtful ones. The trial was no longer just about proving guilt or innocence. It had become a conversation about justice, fairness, and understanding. Outside the courtroom, the news of Maria's speech spread quickly. People who had never paid attention before were now talking about her courage and her message. Many felt inspired to listen more carefully to the voices around them. Maria's friends and supporters gathered quietly, sharing hope and strength. Anna, standing beside Maria, whispered, "You've changed everything today." Maria smiled softly. She knew the road ahead was still difficult, but she felt ready. She had shown the world that sometimes, a single voice could start a new conversation, one that could lead to real change. As the hearing went on, the judge made another surprising move. He invited members of the community to speak about their experiences. One by one, people shared their stories of kindness, struggle, hope, and resilience. The courtroom felt alive with these voices. It was no longer a place of judgment but a space for listening and learning. Judge Wilson looked around and saw the faces of people who deserved to be heard. When the day ended, the judge spoke to the court once more. "Today, we have done something important," he said. "We have remembered that justice is about people, about understanding their lives and their struggles. This court will continue to seek the truth, not just in laws but in the stories of our community." Maria felt a deep sense of peace. She knew the fight was not over, but she also knew they had taken a big step. The system had listened, and that was the start of hope. Later that evening, Maria sat quietly in her small home. She thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the courage, the words spoken in the courtroom. She thought about her family, her friends, and her community. A soft knock came at the door. It was Anna, carrying a small box. "I brought you some tea," she said with a warm smile. Maria laughed gently. "Thank you. Today was hard, but it felt right." Anna nodded. "You gave people a reason to believe. You reminded them what justice really means." Maria looked out the window at the stars shining bright. She knew the journey ahead was long, but she also knew she was not alone. Together, they could keep moving forward. And in that quiet moment, Maria felt the strength of hope that one day, the world would listen to every voice, and justice would be more than just a word. Days passed after the courtroom hearing, but Maria's story did not fade. Instead, it grew stronger, spreading through the town like a warm breeze that touched every corner. People began to talk not just about the trial but about the ideas Maria had shared. Her courage had sparked something new, something hopeful. Maria woke up early each morning, feeling a quiet determination. She still wore the handcuffs during the court sessions, a reminder of the struggle she faced, but inside, she felt lighter. The walls of silence around her community were beginning to crack, and she was ready to help break them down. At the courthouse, Judge Wilson spent long hours reviewing the evidence, the testimonies, and the stories. He thought about the meaning of justice not only as a set of laws but as a promise to treat everyone with fairness and respect. For the first time in his career, the judge saw his role in a new light. He realized that sometimes, justice needed to be about healing, not just punishment. One morning, the judge called Maria and her lawyer into his chambers. The room was quiet but warm. Judge Wilson looked at Maria kindly. "I have listened carefully," he said. "And I believe your voice is important. I want to offer a different path, one that focuses on healing and helping your community." Maria's eyes widened with surprise. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said softly. "I want to do whatever I can to bring hope to my neighbors." The judge smiled. "We will work together to find solutions. This court will support programs that help the people you care about. You will have the chance to lead those efforts." Maria felt a wave of relief and hope wash over her. This was more than she had dared to dream. It was a sign that change was possible not only for her but for everyone who had been waiting for their voices to be heard. Back in the community, Maria and her friends began to organize meetings. They talked about ways to improve schools, create safe spaces for children, and support families in need. The town's leaders started to listen more closely, inspired by the judge's new approach. Maria's neighbors came together in a way they never had before. They cleaned parks, planted gardens, and helped each other with small but meaningful acts of kindness. The neighborhood felt alive again, full of hope and possibility. One afternoon, Maria stood in front of a group of children at the community center. She smiled as they listened eagerly to her stories about courage, fairness, and the power of speaking up. She wanted them to know that their voices mattered, and that they could be leaders too. A young boy raised his hand. "Maria, do you think things will really get better?" Maria looked at him, her eyes shining with truth. "I believe they will," she said. "But it takes all of us working together. We must be brave, kind, and never give up." The children nodded, their faces full of hope. Maria felt a deep joy in that moment. This was the future she wanted to help build. Meanwhile, the trial continued in the courtroom, but it was different now. The judge's new focus on healing changed everything. The prosecutor and the defense worked together to find solutions that helped the community instead of just punishing Maria. People began to see the court as a place for justice and growth. The stories of fairness and kindness spread beyond the town, inspiring others to listen and learn. Maria's handcuffs were finally removed in a small ceremony at the courthouse. It was a quiet moment, but it meant everything. The medal that had held her was now gone, but the strength she had gained remained. Judge Wilson shook her hand warmly. "Thank you, Maria, for showing us the way," he said. Maria smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor, for listening." As Maria left the courthouse that day, she looked around at the faces of the people who had come to support her. She felt the power of community and the promise of a better tomorrow. The sun shone brightly, lighting the path ahead. Maria knew the journey was not over, but now, it was filled with hope, courage, and the belief that justice could truly be for all. The day Maria walked out of the courthouse without handcuffs was the start of something new not only for her but for the whole community. The sun was bright, and the air felt fresh, as if the town itself was waking up from a long sleep. Maria took a deep breath and smiled. She felt free in a way she never had before. The courtroom had not only cleared her name, but it had also opened a door for real change. Her fight was no longer just about one woman, it was about many people who wanted fairness, hope, and a better future. As she stepped into the sunlight, Maria saw her neighbors waiting. There were familiar faces, friends, families, and even some strangers who had heard her story. They cheered quietly, respecting the moment but showing their support. Anna hugged Maria tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed everyone what courage really means." Maria smiled. "We did it together. This is just the beginning." In the days that followed, Maria worked harder than ever. She helped start programs for youth, organized neighborhood meetings, and spoke to local leaders about how to make the town safer and kinder. The community was alive with energy, ready to work toward a shared dream. One afternoon, Maria stood in front of a group gathered in the town hall. People of all ages were there: parents, teachers, elders, and young people. The room buzzed with excitement and hope. Maria spoke softly but clearly. "We have come a long way. Our voices have been heard, and the law has shown us that justice can be fair and kind. But now, the real work begins. Together, we will build a community where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued. The crowd nodded and clapped. Maria's words touched hearts, reminding everyone that change was possible when people stood together. Judge Wilson came to visit the community center one day. He listened to the stories of families and children, seeing firsthand the impact of the new programs. He spoke kindly to Maria and the others, promising to continue supporting their efforts. "You have shown us the true meaning of justice," the judge said. "It is not just about laws, it is about people, compassion, and hope." Maria felt proud but humble. She knew the journey would not always be easy, but she also knew that with the strength of the community, they could face any challenge. As months passed, the neighborhood began to change. Parks were cleaner, schools had more support, and people smiled more often. The fear and silence that once filled the streets were replaced by laughter and conversation. Maria often walked through the neighborhood, greeting friends and neighbors. She saw children playing safely, elders sitting on benches sharing stories, and families working together to make life better. One evening, Maria sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of gold and pink. Anna joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "We have come so far," Anna said softly. Maria nodded, holding her cup tightly. "And there is still so much to do. But now, I believe in the power of hope and the strength of kindness." Anna smiled. "Your courage gave us all that belief." Maria looked up at the stars beginning to shine. She thought about the courtroom, the judge, the neighbors, and everyone who had stood by her side. Their voices had been heard, and their stories had made a difference. In that quiet moment, Maria made a promise to herself to keep fighting for justice, fairness, and kindness. Not just for her community, but for everyone who needed a voice. Her story had started with handcuffs and a courtroom, but it had grown into something much bigger, a story of hope, courage, and new beginnings. And as the night wrapped around the town, Maria knew that the future was bright. Together, they would keep walking forward, building a world where justice belonged to all.